Hi everyone. Hi everyone who joined us with here on Facebook and Kumu. I'm super excited to be here with my beautiful co-host Mafe on our first ever live show with Knovo. Well, as some of you already
Yes.
know, Knovo was formerly my Savvy Tutor and we have just rebranded. So Knovo
Mm-hmm.
actually stands for Knowledge Network Optimized for Virtual Operations, which describes exactly what we do, which is connect educators and learners around the world virtually. So for the last 2 months, Mafi, my team and I have been really crazy and, intense
Mm-hmm.
working on the rebrand and the new features on the platform. And so to
Mm-hmm.
some of you who hasn't checked us out, do visit www.novo.io to check us out on our new features and the new platform. So
Mm-hmm.
Mafi, what do you think and feel about our new look and logo?
I love it, Kelly. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
your beautiful new branding. You know, purple and orange is something that I love.
Yeah,
Of course, you know
vibrant.
me. I'm all about mindset and also balance. And as you know, for me, I study chakras.
Okay.
Purple is about it's on top of the crown of your head, which is knowledge. It
Right.
really equals the knowledge there. And then the orange is balance. So spiritually and mentally, if you're all about education and wanting that balance, and of course, leveling up, Novo knows it very well. So kudos to the team. I'm so happy for you all
Yeah.
and looking forward to what's to come.
Thank you, Mafe. Now, so coming on to our main show, we do have a very special and famous guest with us
Yes.
this afternoon. He is one of Hollywood's most respectable producers, executive producer, director, and also screenwriter. He is well known for his works such as The Smoke Signal, Teen Wolves, My Stick Pizza, and of course our all-time favorite, Home Alone.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Rosenfelt
Yes.
is well recognized globally for the impact he has made to the film industry. So, Mafe, without further ado, shall we now invite Scott to the show?
Yes, yes, yes. Our very first Novo live guest is none other than Scott Rosenfelt. Hi,
Welcome,
Scott.
Scott.
Uh,
Hi,
Hi,
Scott.
nice to see you guys.
Thank you for joining us, of course.
Sure.
The community of Novo and also the people online on Facebook and Kumu is excited to get to know you and everything you've done. Of course, you know me, I'm always excited to hear your stories. So I'm glad Kelly now is going to get to know you even more.
Yes.
Well, you've heard a few of them, so I have to find some new stuff for today.
I'm sure you have endless stories. But first of all, Scott, can you please share with everybody on how did you start out in your passions, of course, in the film industry and just being that
Sure.
successful individual that you are today?
Uh, it's interesting because I always loved movies when I was in high school, but I just loved them as a viewer. I didn't think much about doing that because at the time, we didn't even have video. We had 8 millimeter cameras, and I wasn't really adept at any of that technical stuff, so I really never got into that as some kids did. But I just didn't. I was into writing, especially not screenwriting, but prose writing, journalism, and some other that kind of work. And I was into athletics, so I went to college originally for journalism at Boston University,
Mhm.
which had a very good program, and I liked it. I was getting involved in the Boston community even in my freshman year, and writing for the school paper and doing movie reviews and other kinds of things. And uh, I had a writing class in my second semester in Boston, which was a short story writing class that was actually designed for graduate students. And I was a
Hmm.
freshman, and I had to submit the story to get in, and I got in. And I part of one of the things I did during that second semester
Mhm.
was we had to write a short screenplay, and I loved it. I enjoyed it so much. I thought, this is actually really, really exciting. This could be a really fun way to make a living with, like I really have a job. So I looked around for better film schools, and I found NYU, which was at the time and still is one of the top 2 or 3 in the U.S. And I wasn't, although I liked Los Angeles, I don't know that my family and for other reasons I was ready to just travel 3,000 miles to go to UCLA or USC. So I got into NYU and I fell in love with it immediately. Just immersed myself in film, writing and directing and, learning everything about film. And I really did. I mean, I just fell in love with it completely. And I got out of film school and I stayed in New York for about a year and worked on as many films as I could as a production assistant, gopher, and worked on Saturday Night Fever, and then moved to Los Angeles and basically never looked back. It was the late 70s. I was in LA and I just had a progression through independent film, which was different then. It wasn't the independent film of today, but I made a progression through that world from a production assistant to assistant director to a production manager until the point where I decided to try to find a piece of material and make my own movie, which I did. And that turned into a company that liked my work and offered me a chance to produce Teen Wolf, which became, an extremely successful commercial independent film, which was rare. There's art film and then there's the studios, right? And this was an independent film done for 1.8 million. That wasn't an art movie, but was basically a commercial studio film done for $1.8 million, which very few people knew how to do. And that's what I specialized in through films like that and Mystic Pizza until, at some point, as you'd say, I kind of graduated, to the studios by getting a chance to make Home Alone as a producer. But that was my progression. There's lots of detail in there, but that was the basic progression of going from this sort of world of independent film at the time, like I said, which was different from what it is now, and sort of graduating into studio work.
Right. Thank you, Scott. That was fantastic story and sharing. I think it takes a lot of sacrifice and passion to pursue creativity. Now, coming to the next question, I am actually interested to know, can you share what you do and where you look for creativity? And how do you balance between creativity and versus, the traditional ways of fixed formula to any successful movies, if any?
Well, that's a good question in that, people generally are never sure what a producer does ever. It seems like it comes up all the time in seminars and, and people in round tables and all. And no matter what, somebody says, what does a producer do? I think a producer just puts up money, right? That's what, and it's like, everybody seems to have the same answer for the last 50 years and they're always wrong. So, a producer, there's many facets to being a producer. And the way I approached it is I learned how to make movies. I learned how to make a movie, but I also learned how to write a movie, direct a movie, cast a movie, all the creative stuff. Lots of producers now do very specific things. They don't do everything. There are some that do, but a lot don't. And I'm still part of a crowd where I can do a budget. I know the numbers, but I can also write a screenplay. In fact, I write screenplays. Some of the movies that I'm producing, I've written. So, I learned coming out and really, after film school, sometimes, you go to college and, you think, oh, why did I go to college? It's never going to help me. I should have never wasted, and then all of a sudden you realize some of those lessons kick in because I really was able to look at what I did, both from a creative and business perspective. I like most people, I tend to sort of prefer the creative. But I can do the business and I know the business and I still do that. In fact, I'm writing screenplays now. I'm getting hired to write screenplays. Yet then people say, oh, but we want you to produce the movie too, which is rare in movies to have a writer producer. In television, you see a lot of writer producers because the writers on all the TV shows get a producing credit. To a certain extent, it's a handout. But it is a job in the sense that they're supervising the show and they're more important than the director on a TV show. In film, I think we all know it's usually director, right? Everything's a director, but I'm sort of taking a different road, even though I have directed, which is writing and then producing. So I write the script, and then I'm still working with the director, some of which don't always like it at first, because they don't always want to have the writer around. They want to be able to move things around and change things, and they want to be able to grumble and moan about the writer, but I'm standing there because I'm producing the movie. So I think it's a unique perspective that I bring to what I do, to be able to do both. But, that's why I can shift back and forth between having to have a business meeting and talk to investors, and then have a meeting with the director and talk about rewriting the script, what needs to be done with the writer if I'm not the writer, and how to cast the movie very easily. And I consider it rare. Yes, there are other producers that do that. I can't say I'm the only one, but it seems less and less. It's more specifically, everybody has a very specific role, or somebody's put a deal together. It doesn't even come on the set, but they get a producing credit. But I'm the guy who does all of it, from scratch. And I even, there are projects I have that I've read a newspaper article, and it turns, sometime a year later, it turns into a movie. I'm able to find money for it. I'm able to hire a writer. I'm able to bring money to it, all from just opening up my laptop in the morning and reading something and going, that's pretty cool. That could be a movie. And I have to, that's a part of yourself that's completely creative, how to go there. Because I know there's other people who read the same article who didn't think the same thing I did. So, it's a combination of things. It's sort of being left-brained and right-brained at the same time. Really, it is like having both at the same time.
Amazing, Scott. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, I'm always in awe with all your experience, your stories, and I'm sure there were lessons during all those years of what you have accomplished. So what would be some of those important lessons that you've learned along your career that you can share with us?
Well, I mean, we could talk for hours, which I have.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest one is what happened on Home Alone. When I had made Mystic Pizza, and to me it was sort of the culmination of many years of working in independent film. I had just this feeling. First of all, the independent film world changed a little bit financially during that time, like the late 80s, right around 1990. It was changing. The studios were buying. All of a sudden, the studios got excited about independent film. They hadn't ever. So they were buying. They bought a lot of the independent distributors. Then there was Fox Searchlight. There was Universal Focus. They developed their own in-house, essentially, art division, right? After all those years of people like me banging on their door, now they say, oh, we know how to do this. We're going to do it ourselves, or we'll buy it, right? And the world that I came from of making independent film was changing, and it was a little more difficult. So I thought to myself, and I had an agent, I said, I think it's time to graduate. I think it's time to make a studio movie, one way or the other. Let's see if we can figure out how to get me a studio movie as a producer. And it took a while. It took a few months and phone calls and little conversations, but then all of a sudden, it led to John Hughes, of all people, who I respected tremendously, from, Ferris Bueller and Trains, Planes, and Pretty in Pink and Breakfast Club, all these amazing movies, sent me a script to look at, to produce. And he was at a studio. It was exactly what I was looking for. So I get the script, and it was a movie called Career Opportunities, which is in the pantheon of John Hughes's work, maybe not at the top three. It was a little story about two kids who were stuck in a Kmart after hours, and somebody was in there trying to rob it, and and they were on roller skates and all kinds of stuff. And it was Frank Whaley and Jennifer Connelly, two pretty good actors, and one very well known. And I read the script, and it was okay. Really wasn't that great, to be honest. And I had a partner at the time, and he was like, look, because I was always a little bit more opinionated about scripts. And he said, just what, because we had a meeting scheduled to meet John. And he was like, look, just whatever you do, don't tell John Hughes, of all people, you don't like his screenplay, right? I was like, but this thing is just, why this? After all these years, we're finally getting an opportunity, no pun intended. Why this? Why couldn't it have been, Citizen Kane, but anyway, so we go into the meeting at a studio, which was the first meeting I ever had at a studio, going on a studio lot, going to his office at Universal. And, we're sitting in a conference room, and he comes in and he sits down and just starts talking, and he just looks at us and he goes, so he didn't say anything else. He just said, so what do you think of the script? Yeah. And I'm looking at him, and my partner's kicking me under the table, and we're not saying anything. And he goes, no, really, what do you think of the script? I go, it's all right. Just like that. Right? And he goes, come on, now, really, what do you think? And I said, it's okay. You could tell, obviously. He goes, you know what? You're right. It needs a lot of work. And I want you guys to work on it with the director who we knew, who's a young first-time director, who's somebody we happen to know, who came out of the independent world and said, you guys can work on it and blah, blah, blah. And we talked, and thank you. It was great. Okay, we left. And my partner said, you shouldn't have said that. I said, well, he obviously knew what we knew. He's no dummy, right? But anyway, so a week goes by, and I get a call from his lawyer. He's not a guy who called you directly. And his lawyer said, John really enjoyed meeting you, but he's hiring somebody else to do career opportunities. Okay. Thank you. Hung up. Yeah. He didn't say anything else. So, of course, on one hand, I'm like, it's not that great a movie. On the other, it's like, wait a minute, this could have been my first studio movie. Yeah. And now I guess I'm not getting it. Maybe it's because I was too straightforward with John. 3 weeks go by. I'm thinking this. My partner's pissed at me, and I'm thinking, and finally, after about 3 weeks, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have done that, right? Maybe I shouldn't have told the truth. Except 3 weeks into all this, I come home one day from having coffee on a project that wasn't going anywhere, which tends to happen in LA a lot. And I see I had a condo, and against the door of the condo was an envelope, was an 8.5 by 11 manila envelope. And it was like a delivery, right? And I get closer to it, and I see the Warner Brothers logo on the sticker. And I'm like, a delivery from Warner Brothers, when you work in independent film, you don't get deliveries like that. They just, it doesn't work that way. So I get the envelope, and it's clearly a script. There's a letter from an executive who says, John Hughes requested you read this. Please, when you're done reading it, call me and we'll set up a meeting. And it was Home Alone. So I take it inside. It gets better, though. I take it inside, and I read it. I start reading it, and I'm about 25 pages in, and I was laughing, not just because it was funny, but because of like the difference between career opportunities and this screenplay. It was like, I always say, it's like the scales of justice. One's like up here, one's all the way down here, right? It's like, oh my God. So I called the studio, went in, had the meeting. They said, okay, we're going to send you to Chicago to meet John. He moved back to Chicago. He had lived in LA, and now he's living in Chicago, where he's from. And the director's there, and they didn't even tell me the name of the director. And so a few days later, a limo comes to the house, which I had never been in before, except to a funeral. And I go to the airport in LA, and it's a first-class flight, which I had never been on before, to Chicago. A limo picks us up at the airport. Limo takes us to the Four Seasons, not exactly a small hotel. I get into the room, and John, the phone rings in my room, and it's John in his car. John, one of the 3 people in the world at that time who has a cell phone. one of those things attached to your car. And he says, "Hey, I'm here with the director. I'm in the car. We're going to pick you up and go out to dinner, and talk about the movie." And I said, "Wait, could you tell me who?" And he hangs up. So I walked down to the lobby. And I don't know why nobody wanted to say who the director was for some reason. I walked down to the lobby, and there's John Hughes walking into the lobby with the director, who's Chris Columbus, who's somebody I didn't go to NYU with him literally, but we went to NYU a few years apart, and we knew each other. There were like these groups in LA for NYU graduates, right? And he was like, "Scott, Chris," and John's like, "You guys know each other?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean," and I was like, "Why didn't anybody say, who directed it?" I mean, anyway, so we have a really nice dinner. We talk about the movie. It was very exciting. John says, "Okay, well, I'll take you back to the hotel and pick you up tomorrow morning. We're going to go on a location scout. I'm going to show all you guys all the locations in my world here north of Chicago." And that was, so I go into the room. I'm breathing, a sigh of relief, breathing really deeply, and the phone rings, of course, and it's John, who's now in his car alone. He had dropped Chris off at his in-laws' house, and John says to me, this is John Hughes, who says, I knew after that meeting about career opportunities, I had to find something better for you, and I wanted you to do Home Alone. So I'm really excited about it. And I said, so am I, and thank you. And I hung up, and I thought, I had tears in my eyes because, and I still do sometimes when I tell the story to kids in school, because it was like, you have to tell the truth.
Yeah.
You don't have to be mean. You don't have to be a jerk, but you have to tell what's in your heart. Because if you say what's in your heart, the other people around you, who may even be more talented than you, are going to pick up on it. And that's what happened. And if I had done something solicitous in that meeting with John and said, "Oh, career opportunities, the best script ever written. John, you've outdone yourself," he would have known I was a jerk. And it would have never happened. So that's really the best lesson. Be yourself. Don't be a jerk, but be yourself and be truthful and come from your heart.
Great advice, Scott. Thank you so much. So,
Sure.
having produced so many films, would you say there is any particular one film or movie that you enjoy the most? And why is that so?
Yeah, probably Smoke Signals. It was this really lovely film about Native American culture that we made for under $2 million. That did very well commercially, did very well artistically. We won a lot of awards. We won 2 of the top awards that year at Sundance, and there's only 3. We almost won all 3. And apparently we were told that we were supposed to even get the 3rd, but they didn't really want to do that. They didn't want to give one film all 3 awards. So they split it up. And I think it had this mixture of this wonderful humanity, which was also about the Native American culture, but also showed humanism, really, that we're different, but we're all the same. And that's one of my own favorite messages in certain movies that I make, that, it shows a culture that's different. These guys grew up on a reservation. They lived a different life than I lived or somebody else lived. But ultimately, we learn that we're all the same. And that's what it's about, too, amongst, being with your father and what it's like to bury your father and all of those things. It was a remarkable experience. We shot on an Indian reservation in Idaho. It was a little bit difficult just because of weather and things, but it was spiritual. It was commercial. It had everything all woven together in a way. The script was, I still think it's probably the best script of any movie I've ever worked on, period. I've worked on some good ones and great writers, but I think Smoke Signals is the best screenplay written by a Native American writer, Sherman Alexie, who's fairly well known as a novelist and a poet. He dabbles in Hollywood, but he's short stories, and he's an amazing writer. And to this day, the family that came out of that movie, has always remained. We had a reunion about 3 years ago, and it was
Wow.
not everybody was able to go, but it was
Mhm.
pretty extraordinary seeing everybody, and it was just, because it was like going to war, which most movies are anyway. But some movies are just commercial, right? You make a big
Mhm.
studio movie, it's sort of warlike, but you're making, the Avengers. You're not making
Yeah.
something important. No offense. And this felt important and commercial, and we went through something together, and I've never forgotten it. I've never forgotten it.
Mhm.
I'm
And
sure it
of
was an
course,
emotional moment.
from all the films, I mean, Kelly asked you for one, for one favorite one. So, is there one most memorable person you have worked with?
Oh
I
God,
know that's
Please
a
not
tough
no.
one.
offending anybody.
Or
Well,
you name a couple, because
yeah,
I'm
I'll
pretty
name a
sure
couple.
a lot of people who's tuned in right now is Home Alone fans. I see everybody talking about how it's brought back so much childhood memories. So yes, holiday classic.
Well,
Agree with you, Mark.
uh, I'd have to say, the first movie I directed, called Family Prayers, starred an actor named Joe Mantegna, who was a very
Mm,
famous Broadway actor, drama. David Mamet's one of David Mamet's top actors, and he's been on a TV show for many years, but in between, he made a lot of independent films. And Joe was an extraordinary human being and a fantastic actor. And to this day, I don't see him much, but if I called him, I think, and asked him to do something, he'd probably do it, and we'd
mm,
probably reconnect just like that. I mean, look, Julia Roberts at barely 20 years old was great too, and was really
mm,
good to work with on Mystic Pizza, and really fantastic. So, I've been pretty lucky. Farrah Fawcett on Extremities was it was a very difficult role. It was a very
mhm.
emotional, very physical, very difficult role, being, basically a character who's abused, put in a fireplace, and then hid, gets out and turns the tables on her kidnapper, and, torture her. And, she went through a very tough time making the movie, and I had to spend a lot of time with her, and had a lot of respect for her as well. There,
Mhm.
the one thing about actors is they, the one thing I think journalists make the mistake of is when a movie comes out, of course, what do they do when they do a press, run? They interview the actors, right? And
Mhm.
they, on one hand, of course, I understand, but on another, they start asking actors questions about the movie, and which are
Yeah.
questions that really are for the writer and director or the producer, who
Right.
may have been on the movie for 15 years. So they're asking
Mhm.
the actor, like, well, like, when you started working on this movie, and when you conceived of the, like, it's like, wait a minute, get the writer here, get the producer here, do something,
Yeah.
be smart about this, right? You can ask
Mhm.
the actor questions about their involvement in the movie when they showed up
Mhm.
2 weeks before they started shooting and shot it, and that's it. When there was a writer or a director or a producer on it for 10 years, be smart about it, right? But it is their butts on the line too. I'm not
Yeah.
denigrating their work, and it's remarkable when they're really good. It really is. And
Mhm.
I think I've been pretty lucky. On the last movie I did, Critical Thinking, about a high school chess team, John Leguizamo directed it and starred in it, and John was. It rekindled my feeling for great directors, because I've worked with a lot of good directors, and I've worked with a lot of directors who aren't great. Directors often get too much credit that they don't deserve. So if you're going to direct, you better be great, because the great ones deserve it, but there
Yeah.
aren't a lot of great ones. And John, rekindled my excitement in working with somebody as being a producer, to help him, find his vision for the movie and put it on the screen. So I really loved working with John. I'm sure I'll be working with him again. He's a fantastic actor, and I think he's a great director too, now that we did a movie together. And, in between all that, there the Home Alone actors were fun. I mean, Nobody knew exactly it was
Yeah.
going to turn into this, and Dan Stern wasn't the original choice for that role, and you know we didn't know if Macaulay Culkin at 9 years old was going to be able to pull it off. So there are a lot of good actors and good people generally. There are people who are not, but that's going to happen probably in any business. It just gets accentuated when you find out an actor is not so nice or whatever, right? Off the set or
Yeah.
those kinds of things. And there've been a few of those. There've been a few.
I'm sure.
Yeah. I know, Scott, you say that you have started out your career doing producing, screenwriting, directing, almost everything. And I do know some actors who have since ventured out into directing.
Right.
For example, Clinton Eastwood, Tom Hanks, they have used their perspective to inform of their directorial style. Now, do you think that it's true that the performance of the actors actually dictates how good the directors are? And do you have any advice to those aspiring directors and screenwriters who
Well,
wants
I
to
mean,
do this?
look, some of the great actors don't need a lot of help. And there have been actors who have said to directors very nicely, I really respect you. I just leave me alone. Right. Having said that, some actors don't know how good or bad they really are. They may have an impression of that, but they don't. And a really good director will pull something else out of even a great actor. And I've seen it. Rarely, but I've seen it. So, it's learning your craft as a director. Just because everybody wants to direct and knowing the camera, and knowing where to put the camera and knowing lenses and knowing the technical stuff, you should learn acting. Even when I went to film school, I took acting classes separate from my time at NYU. I actually took a class with Lee Strasberg, which was amazing, absolutely amazing in New York. So I think you need to understand as a director what an actor is going through to help that person give their best performance, because a really good director can get something out of even a great direct actor, and certainly can help make just an okay actor a little bit better, for sure. And it is important, but they have to learn their craft. They have to really learn their craft.
Yep, it's all about learning, and of course, that's what Knovo is all about, right?
Right.
In line with that, of course, we'll talk about what exciting announcements that you will be sharing here in Knovo. But what else? What else is there to look forward to with you right now and in the near future for your career, Scott?
Well, I continue to work on projects that I've written that I'm producing. We have a project in the Philippines called Counterplay, which is something I wrote and something I'm producing. And our director is Pedring Lopez, who directed a movie called Maria, which was a very big hit on Netflix last year. And it's an exciting project. It's an exciting project because it's a commercial movie in English primarily, an international film, but done in the Philippines, and it's a Philippine movie. And that's rare for the Philippines to make a big international movie that's Filipino but international, and some Tagalog, and a mixture of actors in it and of characters in it, Western and Filipino, but mostly Filipino. And I'm very excited about that. It's a thriller, and it's a good story, and that one in particular. There's another movie I'm working on with Pedring, which is called G. It's a female martial arts film starring Minzy, who's has a hit single out right now. She was one of the people who basically one of the first bands, female K-pop bands in Korea. She's on her own now, but she has a single out right now. She's acting, and I'm very excited about that. It's a good genre. It's a genre that's popping up all over Netflix. If you and I'm watching all of them, and it's a really fun project that I'm doing, and doing a movie in Australia that I wrote, and working with the actor Sam Worthington, and hopefully that'll happen. We'll see. So there's lots of things going on. There's um, let's see, and just a week ago, out of the blue, which often happens, somebody in the States asked me to write a script and then produce the movie from a book adaptation. So I'm going to start working on that in the fall. So there's a lot on my plate, especially during COVID. I'm not really in the mood to turn anything down because you never know. And and we're also building a company in the Philippines, and we're hoping to be able to do multiple television shows and other projects that will be shot in the Philippines that are commercial, international product. I'm working on another one, TV show with the showrunner and director of the hit Apple series called Tehran, which is an Israeli series. And that's also with Pedring, but the showrunner is Danny Sirkin, who happens to be one of the two showrunners on Tehran and directed all the episodes of the first season. So I'm working with a lot of international filmmakers. I'm doing another project with an Israeli director. And I spend a lot of time, working with international talent. A movie I did in the States called The Jade Pendant was half in Mandarin. The movie was half in Mandarin. The director, Puchi Leong, was from Hong Kong. And the actors were either Chinese American, Taiwanese, or from mainland China. So it's something I love. I do a lot of that. A lot of it has to do with just a new experience. I spent enough time making movies in the States, and I don't really like making movies in Los Angeles. Even when I lived in Los Angeles, I barely shot there because I don't want to see the same movie that everybody else makes, right? The same streets, the same stuff. So I like looking for stories that are all around the world. And I like looking for stories about, other cultures, because it's part of my thing, which is, doing stories about other cultures, but showing how similar we all really are. So that excites me. And when I write, I think about that. I like to write true stories too. I like to write interesting true stories. I'm doing a movie in India as well that takes place in India, and it's involves the CIA and the Himalayas and the Indian and Chinese government. And that's something I wrote that I'm going to be producing. And I can't mention yet who the director is because we're just negotiating with him, but it's a very big director. So all that's, I like to keep. I have a story I want to do in Thailand that I'm talking to some people about putting some development money in. That's an American in Thailand, based on a true story. And so I look for really exciting things all the time. I saw this tiny article in a small magazine about 6 months ago about a story about an Israeli woman and an Iranian man who's Muslim who met at a peace camp, sort of really like a bunch of people in their late 30s who are all hippies, modern day hippies, at a peace camp in Turkey. There were people from all around Europe and, and other countries like Iran and who met there. And these two people fell in love. Now, it's impossible. He can't come to Israel because Iran's an enemy, and she certainly can't. He can't bring his Jewish wife to Iran, and so they have no place that they can live. So the name of it is Nowhere in the World, because they are trying to find a home. And their only crime is that they fell in love, and they're currently in Cyprus, living in a tent basically, and they're trying to get citizenship in Cyprus. Maybe they'll end up in Armenia or Georgia. They cannot find a place to live, and like I said, their only crime is falling in love. And I read this article, and I was like, oh my God, of course that's a movie. How come somebody else doesn't see that, right? And I've been developing it. We raised development money out of a fund in Israel. I have an Israeli director. I have an Israeli-American writer. I have the rights to the two people's story. And we're going to make the movie. And it's going to be a very cool, small, sort of, crossover art commercial movie about this extraordinary love story improbable love story that really shouldn't happen
Mm-hmm.
and is dangerous. You know, he
Mm-hmm.
can't even contact his family, because if he
Yeah.
contacts his family with her, his family's going to get thrown in jail in Iran. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really amazing. So I find stuff, you know, I have a
Mm-hmm.
life where I have to wake up every day and discover something. Otherwise, I don't eat, essentially, right? Or my
Yeah.
kids don't eat.
Yeah.
So I find stuff, and it turns into something. The feeling of reading some obscure article and then a year and a half later it becoming this whole thing with actors and stuff, and it's there's nothing like it for me. There's nothing like it. That
Mm-hmm.
creative feeling, turning nothing, literally nothing, into something
Mm-hmm.
alive and artistic. There's nothing like it, and I think, you know, that should be an inspiration to people that are like, how do you do this and what do you do? It's like, just do it, man. Don't complain. Don't worry about it. Just you know, here's what I do. So hopefully you learn something from it, and you have to have that passion. You have to have passion for it. You can't get cynical. You can't, you know, say like people at studios do. No, if they don't pay me $15 million, I'm not going to do it. It's like that's a
Yeah.
whole other way of living, and that's nothing to
Mm-hmm.
do with being creative, you know, and learning your craft. That's something else. And you know, I know people do that, and that's their business, but not me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't operate that way.
Wow, there's a lot of exciting things happening with your life, Scott, and a lot of things happening in Southeast Asia. Hopefully, you can come to Singapore as well. Hopefully, we are all looking forward
Yes.
to
Why
that
not?
too. I am looking forward to it. So,
Mm-hmm.
well,
That'd be great.
before we take some of the questions from the live Facebook comment sections, can you share with the audience, some of these upcoming programs or classes that you have planned to put on Knovo starting from September onwards, some of the teaser for our audiences, and what can they look forward to?
Well, I think maybe Maffei needs to jump in, and then I can, you know, I can
Yeah,
embellish it.
you can talk about your producing, writing, and your directing. What can they expect?
Well, I've done multiple seminars around the world, and then recently we did a major uh, 3 weekend seminar in the Philippines, that I did, uh, a producing workshop that was 8 hours, a writing workshop from the perspective of a producer, and
Yeah.
with guests on it, and then a directing workshop from the perspective of a producer who also directs, and we had
Mhm.
guests on that as well, and each one was 8 hours, and we taped everything, and I think between what we already have and new classes and new, obviously things like that for me evolve, you know, it evolves. Yes, we have all this footage already that people, you know, somebody's going to see at some point, but also I turn, I mean, I teach, so I turn that into something that's ongoing.
Mhm.
So a unique perspective on producing movies from the perspective of somebody in Hollywood who also isn't totally Hollywood, because I don't think you really learn very much if you tell people who aren't ever going to make $100 million movie, well, this is what you do when you make $100 million movie. It's pointless. It's pointless. People are trying to make a movie for $10,000. You know, they're not up to that level. So this is a way of teaching people a way in, an excitement about what you do, a passion for what you do. But I cover all of it, everything to do, every detail of producing, every detail of directing, and every detail of writing, and that's what I expect and hope to do as well with this.
Thank
And
you.
Scott also is very humble because he did share how he started with myself and my children. How you have to start somewhere, whether it be interning, right, Scott, from mopping
Yeah.
the floors to just
Yeah.
trying everything out. Maybe you can share a little bit about that, because that's something that I really admire about you.
When I started,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I graduated from NYU Film School, and I saw a ad on the bulletin board, literally almost as I was walking out, maybe for the last time. There was a little, um, a little card, and there was there, there were no computers, there was no online anything, And I looked at this little card and it said, PA, production assistants needed on an independent movie. Come down to the Tombs, which is a New York City prison, not the nicest place in the world, by the way, and talk to so-and-so, because that's where they were going to be shooting, right? So I looked at the card. I was like, all right. And it did say on it, no pay. They probably should have not put that on there, although it was good, because there's probably a bunch of people who just didn't do it because, I said, well, I've never worked on a professional movie. I should do it once, right? For free. And I kind of gave myself a rule, do it once. So I went down to the Tombs, and there was, they were getting ready to shoot in a few days. They were still in pre-production, and the production manager said, "Oh, you just graduated from NYU. Congratulations." I was a warm body, and she said, "Okay, come tomorrow and you start." And I was on a set. Next thing I knew, I was on a set. Professional actors, some people who are somewhat known today, a director who I stayed in touch with for many years, who turned and I produced. I went from being a PA on that movie to producing a movie that he directed. Years later,
Wow.
Extremities, a director named Robert Young, and I was like, I've got to be on the set. Sometimes they would send me on errands. When you're a production assistant, you do all sorts of stuff. You're either on the set doing stuff, or or the production manager says we need tape, and they give you money, and you run out to a store and buy tape. But I wanted to be on the set, so I made sure one of the people in the art department used to every morning before we started shooting, because the movie was very organic. So even though they were primarily actors, there were some people. We had one floor of the prison that was ours. The prison was still active, but we had a floor for the movie. And a lot of the extras, were actors, but some of them probably did time. They were very comfortable sitting in those rooms, and they smoked a lot, as they do in prison. And so at the end of the day, there were like hundreds of cigarette butts on the floor. So every morning, somebody in the art department, their job was to sweep the floor. And one morning, I was like, no, I'm going to do this. And I just said to the guy, I'll do it. And what it did was, as I was sweeping, they were starting, the camera guy was talking to the director, preparing shots, and I was sweeping, and I got to see stuff because I had the broom in my hand. I didn't slow down necessarily, but now, I slowed down a little bit so I could listen. But I would make sure I was the guy who swept the floor, because then I was always going to be standing on the set. They couldn't kick, they weren't going to take the broom out of my hand. And, you'd think, oh my God, you were sweeping the floor. But sweeping the floor turned into a producing career, really, because I listened. Because what I did, I just listened to everything that was going on. I also tell people getting out who want to work and everything, and they start talking to everybody about their dream, and I want to direct it. It's like, there's a right time for that. There's a moment for that, but there's times that aren't right for that. And really, what I need you to do is listen and shut up, basically, and you'll learn something. And when it's appropriate at lunchtime or whatever, you can ask questions, and that's fine. I learned that too. Bob Young, who was a fantastic director. I remember we at lunchtime we ate in the prison, so our caterer set up in the mess hall of the prison. So we had trays, we had prison trays that we ate off of. And you'd take your tray and sit down like an inmate would. And one day I was sitting just by myself, and the director sat down next to me, and I was like looking around like, usually directors are very aloof, or they eat by themselves, or they sit with the actors. And he sat down next to me and he said, "Hey, so how do you think it's going?" And I was like, who's he asking? He's asking me? And he really wanted to know, because he's a smart guy. He knew I had come from NYU, and and we had a conversation. It was really lovely. He was a great director. Then years later, when I was producing Extremities, and he somehow got involved in the project as a director, we met, and I said, "Bob, you're going to remember this when I tell you, but I know you don't remember it now." I said, I was a PA on Short Eyes, which was the name of the movie. And he goes, "Oh my God." And he goes, "And you're now my boss." He said, I'll never forget it. Great guy.
Amazing.
Good. So Scott and Mafi, I see we have a lot of questions coming in from the
Yes.
audience from Facebook. Maybe we can read one or two of those. From
Mhm.
Jasmine, she asked, what would you say, Scott, has been the biggest change or trend in the film industry today versus from when you first started?
Well, the biggest one, and then there's a second biggest one, which might actually be bigger. But the biggest one is that we used to shoot film, and we don't anymore at all. And I don't even recommend it. I know there's a handful of people that do it. I think Steven Spielberg still does, and that's that's great. But nobody does because there's no point anymore. And hard drives and everything, and it all looks great. It looks beautiful. You don't know the difference. I don't know the difference, and a lot of people don't know the difference. And it's made shooting a lot easier, to be quite honest. It's a lot faster, and it's really is a sea change in everything. Going from 35 millimeter film to high end video, 4K, 8K, 156K, whatever it turns out to be. Big change. The second big change, which may be a little bit more obvious now because of the pandemic, but how the streamers has sort of overtaken, the theatrical business. Theatrical is trying to claw its way back, and it will. It will. I mean, people still want to go, and theaters in the U.S. are opened, and they're not in every country, but people are going. But the streamers have really taken over, and where they've taken over, even if it isn't going to be completely apparent to the audience, because when movie theaters start opening, it has changed the way filmmakers make and sell and try to pitch their movies. Nobody, when I say nobody, outside of a very small handful of the Marvel, universe, thinks of their movie as theatrical. I don't anymore. The first thing I think about is who's going to buy, which streamer is going to buy this, and whether we pitch them first to make it or whether we have them see the finished product. I most of the time don't even think anymore about a theatrical release. And that's obviously a gigantic change. It's not necessarily bad. When it first started a few years ago, Netflix and Amazon, they started doing this. It was very exciting in a way, and Apple, to say, oh, there's going to be all these kinds of movies that probably I like to make, not the giant studio movies, right? And then all of a sudden, you see when Apple made their announcement, I think Tim Cook, he did a press conference announcing Apple Plus, as a platform, and at the press conference was Steven Spielberg. Now, I like Steven Spielberg, but I think you know what my point is. My point is, he didn't have an independent filmmaker standing next to him. He had Steven Spielberg. So it's a new studio, and Netflix has done the same thing. Their movies are 50, 60, 70, 80, $100 million. Movie stars, nobody's kidding anybody what they want. They want commercial product, just like studios. So they're just new studios in different clothing. And we all have to adapt to that. They're not going to make your favorite indie movie. There's movies that they buy from all around the world, which is one of the reasons why I like working in Asia and sort of sneaking up on them, having them think they're buying, a non-Hollywood movie and have it be a Hollywood movie, but from a different country. So I think that's actually a really good model, and that's why I like it. But they've replaced the studios to a certain extent, and that that's obviously a gigantic change. And I think really those are the two biggest, in my experience.
Now, Scott, we have another fan of yours from Singapore, Eugene Lee. He has tons of questions for you. He asks, what job experience would help him to become a film producer? And also, what are the biggest production challenges that you will encounter in making a film?
Well, he has to get work. You know, you have to get work as a production assistant, an intern, a gopher. You have to learn from people, and you
Hmm.
cannot skip the steps. You know, you cannot all of a sudden be a producer. You know, maybe if your family's wealthy, and they say, "Oh, here's $5 million, go make a movie." But you have to work for people, and you have to learn from people,
Right.
and there's ways to do that. There's things you can find out about when movies and television shows are being made.
Hmm.
They're made all the time, and to try to find a way in to work on one of those productions. The biggest challenges are, honestly, usually it's getting things funded. Oddly enough, it's not the making. The making, the stories about weather and, actors not coming out of their trailers. And, sometimes, you're on the set and you have a scene and you're like, oh man, I know we worked on this scene, but it just doesn't seem to be working. And you have to sit really quickly with the director and figure out how to rewrite it. Which is nerve wracking. But I think I'm a good producer because I kind of have, as they say, ice water running through my veins. When there's a problem, I kick in. I don't run away. I like them. I
Hmm.
like having to solve something very quickly, very fast, but in a smart way. And I don't have any problem doing that.
Awesome.
We're running out of time on the set. The weather's bad. What
Hmm.
do we do? How do we shoot this next scene? And I'm sort of built for solving problems. So
Yeah.
I actually relish stuff happening because, in a way, if you're a good producer, and if you're a good producer, you've set everything up so you don't have that much to do, in a sense. So sometimes it's good when something really falls apart because it actually, they all turn to you, right? They all turn to the producer and go, now what do we do? So I mean, I don't want that to happen on every movie I work on, but I enjoy solving the problem and working with the director, with the actors sometimes, or a crew person, and figuring out a really fast solution to get something done.
Hmm.
And John and I did that a lot on Critical Thinking. We only had 20 days to shoot the movie. That was difficult in
Wow.
itself. We had a lot of chess matches. We had a lot of stuff to do. There was even one time when one morning, we had to shoot this really big chess match. We had lots of extras, kids from high schools who all played chess. We had a big room. We had extra cameras. And, before we started shooting that day, and John and I used to ride together, somebody would pick us up. He said to me, I just want to tell you, I basically have no idea what I want to do today. And I was like, what? I don't know. He said, I really don't know. I'm going to lean on you and the others to help me get through today because I've never really done anything like this. Multiple
Mhm.
cameras, chess matches, and we did it. We got through it. We figured out a plan. I ran around with a second unit shooting all these other pieces of all these other games that were going on because we had kids all set at chessboards and everything. And we
Hmm.
figured everything out. It was not easy. It was hard work, but we did it. So, those are the kinds of things you have to be ready, and you have to know your craft. So, you have to be ready when something bad
Hmm.
happens. Yeah, it's sort of instinctive, right? It's like hitting a baseball. I was a good baseball player, and people ask me like, how do you hit a baseball when it's coming in 90 miles an hour? And I did. I was very good. But I often
Hmm.
say I don't know if I'd be the best coach because I still don't know how I
Right.
saw that ball ever. I don't know. You see it coming out of the pitcher's hand. Somehow you're able to see the spin, or you can see time the speed of it, so that you swing right at the right time instead of always swinging and missing. So
Yes.
you have to all this stuff has to be internalized, so you're not so it's instinctive. You know how to solve the problem, and that takes experience, and it takes doing it, and it really just takes
Hmm.
doing it, and doing it, and
Good
making
Yeah.
mistakes too.
Exactly.
Good advice, Eugene.
Exactly.
There you go. Just go all out and do it, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think we have
Exactly.
time for maybe just one more question, Mafe. Is it
Yeah,
okay?
go ahead. But at the same time, guys, you have to sign up for Scott's workshop upcoming in September. I know you all have a lot of questions for Scott because he does have such a great experience and knowledge in the film industry. So I do see a lot of questions there, but I know for sure Scott will cover all this in his workshop. But yes, let's do one more question.
Maybe just one more from Rowena Law. So she asks about, can you share some tips for TV directors to venture into feature film directing?
Well, these days, because TV is so much better than it was when I started, I don't really know anymore if there's much of a distinction. There's a little bit, some of the shows, and I'm using mostly the American shows, the shows that are called procedurals. Procedurals are, like NCIS or something where every week it's a totally new, it's all the same characters, but it's a new story, right? Every week, a new story, new something, you have the same basic characters, but it's different from what's happening in most of the streamers, which are called anthology series, where you have 6 or 8 or 9 episodes and it's one story, right? So I think the people in the year when I started in the business, there were only procedurals. There was no such thing as the anthology series. And a lot of those directors had habits of like, you shoot a lot. You shoot a lot of pages a day. You shoot 8 pages a day instead of 3 or 4 on a movie. And you shoot a certain way and you cover things a certain way. That's not the way you would cover and shoot a movie. So I think from that perspective, you have to sort of relearn how to use the camera, how to make sure you use close-ups in a different way or not, how you can actually be much wider. In TV, you never really do long, far away shots. It just doesn't happen because the producers are always like, we just want to see the actors who are the stars of the show, right? So there is a different feel, and you should, if you are transitioning from one to the other, you should watch movies. Watch movies that have a sweep to them, a scope to them. Lawrence of Arabia, great things. I don't mean like movies from last week. I mean like the history of movies, things like Bridge on the River Kwai and, Lawrence of Arabia and, even the Godfather films, where you see this sort of epic sweep of filmmaking, and you'll get a feel for the difference between shooting in TV, which is all medium shots, to be able to get really tight or really wide, and come up with a perspective that's different from just the medium view of how you see every actor. At the same time, these days, most of the anthology series are shot like features. So a lot of those directors are learning on the fly and doing it already so that they can go back and forth between, which they do, between a TV series and a movie, because they're learning that. But there are differences if you're making certain kinds of soap opera type stuff, or certain shows that are really just medium shots of the actors. You don't get the full view of the sets. You don't cut away to something. You're never cut away to something that doesn't seem meaningful. And in movies, you could have a close-up of somebody's finger and all that to build a scene. And you don't do that in TV. You don't do that in that kind of TV. You just don't do that. So, there are things that you can learn. Definitely things that you can learn.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon, Scott. I think,
Sure.
yeah, with that, we have come to the end of the Q&A with Scott Murphy.
Yes. So
My
thank
pleasure.
you everyone for tuning in. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, don't forget to follow Knovo, official Knovo, all the social media platforms, because there we will announce the dates and schedules of when Scott will be providing more knowledge to all of you. So to everyone on Kumu and Facebook, good to see you all, and so many viewers.
Thank you to friends who have tuned in from Facebook and Kumu, of course. If you have other questions for Scott, do write into us at hello@knovo.io and follow us on Facebook and social media channels. With that, happy National Day to all my Singaporean friends, and enjoy your public holiday. Thank you. Have a good
Thank
one.
you, Scott.
Bye.
Thank you.
Scott.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.